The rain-slicked streets of Portland glistened under the streetlights. But Ethan's world was dark, a shadow cast by a secret he'd buried deep. At 19, he stood alone outside the diner where his mother worked, the neon sign flickering like his resolve. He clutched a letter in his pocket, its edges worn from years of hiding, its words a confession he'd never dared speak. Ethan had always been the quiet one, the kid who blended into the background of his own life. Growing up in a small apartment with his single mom, Lisa, he learned early to keep his head down and his heart guarded. Lisa was his rock, but her best friend, Marie, was the storm that upended everything. Marie, with her sharp laugh and sharper tongue, had been a fixture in their home since Ethan was 10. She was the cool aunt he never had until she wasn't. At 16, Ethan realized he was gay. It wasn't a revelation born of joy, but of fear, a truth he tucked away like a bruise. He told no one, not even his mom, who loved him fiercely but was often lost in her own struggles, bills, long shifts, and a string of bad boyfriends. Marie, though, seemed to see right through him. She'd catch his eye during dinners, her gaze lingering too long, her comments cutting too close. "You're too pretty to be alone, Ethan," she'd say, her voice teasing but laced with something that made his skin crawl. He was too young to name it, too scared to push back. One night, when Lisa was working late, Marie came over with a bottle of wine and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ethan was 17, lanky and awkward, still figuring out who he was. They sat on the couch, the TV droning in the background, and Marie's questions grew personal. "You ever kissed a boy?" she asked, her tone playful but probing. Ethan froze, his heart pounding. He mumbled something vague, but Marie leaned closer, her hand brushing his knee. "You don't have to be shy with me," she whispered. The air felt thick, wrong. When she leaned in, her lips grazing his ear, Ethan bolted upright, stammering an excuse about homework. She laughed it off, but her eyes were cold, and he never forgot the way they pinned him. He didn't tell anyone. Not his mom, not his best friend, Caleb, who was the only person Ethan felt safe with. Caleb, with his easy grin and blonde hair that always fell into his eyes, was the one bright spot in Ethan's world. They'd met in freshman year, bonded over shared playlists and late-night talks about dreams bigger than their small lives. Caleb was openly gay, unapologetic in a way Ethan envied. But even with Caleb, Ethan kept the incident with Marie locked away, a secret that festered like an open wound. Now, at 19, Ethan stood outside the diner, the letter in his pocket burning a hole in his courage. It was addressed to his mom, a confession of everything his truth, his pain, the reason he flinched whenever Marie was around. He'd written it a year ago, after a fight with Lisa when she'd asked why he was so distant. He couldn't tell her then, couldn't bear the thought of shattering her friendship with Marie or, worse, her trust in him. So he stayed silent, letting the weight of it crush him. The diner door swung open, and Caleb stepped out, his leather jacket zipped against the drizzle. "You okay, man?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. Ethan's throat tightened. Caleb had a way of seeing him, really seeing him, and it both terrified and anchored him. "I need to do this," Ethan said, gripping the letter. Caleb's eyes flicked to his hand, then back to his face, understanding without asking. "I'm here," he said simply, and Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Inside, the diner was warm, smelling of coffee and grease. Lisa was behind the counter, her hair pulled back, her smile tired but genuine. Ethan's heart ached at the sight of her. How could he tell her that her best friend had crossed a line, had made him feel small and scared in his own home? How could he risk her disbelief, her anger? But as he watched her pour coffee for a regular, laughing at some old joke, he knew he couldn't keep carrying this alone. "Mom," he started, his voice barely above a whisper. She turned, her smile faltering as she saw the look in his eyes. "Can we talk?" The letter felt heavier than ever, but for the first time, Ethan felt ready to let it go. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly as Ethan slid into a booth, the letter still clutched in his hand. Lisa wiped her hands on her apron and sat across from him, her brow creasing with worry. "What's wrong, kiddo?" she asked, her voice soft but edged with the exhaustion of a double shift. Ethan's mouth went dry. He'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. But now, with his mom's eyes searching his, the words felt like stones in his throat. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice cracking. He glanced at Caleb, who stood by the counter, pretending to study the menu but clearly ready to step in if needed. Ethan drew a shaky breath. "It's about Marie." Lisa's face shifted, confusion giving way to a guarded look. "Marie? What about her?" Ethan's fingers tightened around the letter, its edges damp from his sweaty palms. He slid it across the table, unable to meet her eyes. "Read this, please." Lisa hesitated, then unfolded the paper. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, and Ethan watched her expression change: shock, then disbelief, then something harder, like anger. "Ethan, this can't be right," she said, her voice low. "Marie's been my friend for years." She stopped, rereading the letter, her hands trembling. The letter laid it all bare, the night Marie got too close. The way her words and touch made Ethan feel violated. The years of silence that followed because he didn't want to hurt his mom. It also held his truth, that he was gay, that he'd been afraid to tell her, afraid she'd see him differently. Writing it had been like carving out a piece of his soul, but giving it to her felt like jumping off a cliff. "Ethan," Lisa said, her voice breaking, "why didn't you tell me sooner?" Tears welled in her eyes, and Ethan felt a pang of guilt. "I didn't want you to hate me," he whispered. "Or her. She's your best friend." Lisa reached for his hand, but he pulled back, the reflex automatic. "I could never hate you," she said fiercely. "But I need to talk to her. I need to understand." Ethan's stomach twisted. He'd known this moment would come, but the thought of confronting Marie made him feel 17 again, small and powerless. Caleb approached, his presence a quiet anchor. "You don't have to do this alone," he said, looking at Ethan but addressing Lisa too. She nodded, her face a mix of resolve and pain. "I'll call her," she said. "Tonight." The rest of the evening blurred. Ethan stayed at Caleb's apartment, a cramped studio with posters of indie bands and a couch that smelled faintly of pizza. They sat side by side, not speaking much, but Caleb's shoulder brushed against Ethan's, a silent promise of support. "You did the hard part," Caleb said finally. "Telling her. That's huge." Ethan managed a small smile. "Feels like I just lit a match and walked away." Caleb chuckled, but his eyes were serious. "Whatever happens, you've got me." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken feelings. Ethan had always known Caleb cared, but lately, those glances, those lingering touches, felt like something more. He pushed the thought aside, too raw to explore it now. Back at home, Lisa sat at the kitchen table, her phone in hand. She'd called Marie, who sounded confused, then defensive, promising to come over the next day to clear things up. Lisa didn't sleep that night, her mind replaying every moment she'd missed Ethan's silences, his avoidance of Marie, the way he'd changed after that summer. She felt like a failure as a mother, blind to her son's pain. The next morning, Marie arrived. Her usual confidence dimmed. Ethan stayed in his room, listening through the thin walls as Lisa confronted her. "Did you ever make Ethan uncomfortable?" Lisa asked, her voice steady but sharp. Marie's laugh was nervous. "Uncomfortable. He's always been so sensitive. Lisa, you know that." Ethan's heart sank. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even acknowledging it. He wanted to burst out, to scream the truth, but fear kept him rooted. Caleb, who'd insisted on coming over, squeezed his hand. "You don't have to face her yet," he said. "But you will. When you're ready." Lisa's voice rose, cutting through the walls. He wrote it all down. "Marie. Every detail. Don't lie to me." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan closed his eyes, wishing he could disappear, but Caleb's hand in his was a lifeline. For the first time, he felt like he might survive this. The apartment was suffocating, the air thick with tension as Marie's voice cut through the silence. "Lisa, you're blowing this out of proportion," she said, her tone sharp now, defensive. Ethan's just confused. He was a kid, probably misread things. Ethan, still in his room, felt his chest tighten, his anger mixing with shame. She was rewriting his truth, twisting it into something small, dismissible. Lisa's chair scraped against the floor. Misread. He was 17. Marie, you were in your 30s. You don't get to call that a misunderstanding. Her voice shook with betrayal, each word a crack in the foundation of their friendship. Ethan pressed his forehead against the wall, trying to steady his breathing. Caleb sat beside him, silent but close, his presence a quiet strength. "I didn't do anything wrong," Marie insisted, her voice rising. "He's always been dramatic. You know how kids are." Ethan's hands curled into fists. Dramatic. The word stung, echoing every doubt he'd ever had about speaking up. But then Lisa's voice came again, fiercer this time. "Don't you dare blame my son. He's not the one who crossed a line." The argument escalated, words flying like shards of glass. Ethan wanted to run, to hide from the wreckage of his confession. But Caleb's hand found his shoulder. "You're stronger than this," Caleb whispered. "You already broke the silence. That's everything." Ethan nodded, but the fear still gnawed at him, fear that Lisa wouldn't believe him fully, that Marie would spin a story that made him the villain. When the front door slammed, Ethan flinched. Marie was gone, her parting words a bitter promise to talk when you've calmed down. Lisa knocked softly on Ethan's door, her face pale when she entered. "She's gone," she said, sitting on the edge of his bed. I don't know what to say. Ethan. I'm so sorry." Ethan's throat burned. "Do you believe me?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Lisa's eyes filled with tears as she pulled him into a hug. "Of course I do," she said. "I just wish you'd told me sooner. I should have seen it." Her guilt was palpable, and Ethan hated that his truth had hurt her, too. The next few days were a blur of quiet conversations and uneasy silences. Lisa cut off contact with Marie, blocking her number and avoiding her usual haunts. Ethan felt a strange mix of relief and lost, relief that his secret was out, loss for the family dynamic that would never be the same. He spent most of his time with Caleb, who seemed to know exactly when to crack a joke or just sit in silence. One evening, as they walked along the Willamette River, Caleb stopped, turning to face Ethan. The city lights reflected on the water, casting a soft glow on his face. "You know you don't have to carry this alone anymore, right?" he said. Ethan looked away, his heart racing. Caleb's concern had always felt like more than friendship, But Ethan wasn't sure he could trust his own feelings not after everything. "I don't know how to move past it," Ethan admitted, his voice raw. "Every time I think about her, I feel dirty." Caleb stepped closer, his eyes fierce. "You're not dirty. You're you, Ethan. And that's enough." The words hit hard, stirring something deep in Ethan's chest. He wanted to believe them, wanted to believe in Caleb's unwavering faith in him. Back at home, Lisa was trying to rebuild their connection. She started small cooking Ethan's favorite meals, asking about his day with a gentleness she hadn't shown in years. But the weight of Marie's absence lingered, a ghost in their conversations. Ethan noticed the strain in his mom's eyes, the way she second-guessed herself now. He wanted to fix it, but he didn't know how. One night, Caleb invited Ethan to a local open mic, a distraction from the chaos. The small venue was packed, the air humming with music and laughter. As a poet took the stage, reciting lines about love and resilience, Ethan felt Caleb's hand brush against his. It wasn't an accident, and when their eyes met, Ethan didn't pull away. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of something brighter than pain, something that felt like hope. The open mic night buzzed with energy, but Ethan's world narrowed to the warmth of Caleb's hand against his. The poet's words faded into the background as Ethan's pulse raced, a mix of fear and longing swirling in his chest. He didn't pull away, but he didn't lean in either, caught in the gravity of a moment he wasn't sure he was ready for. Caleb's eyes held his, steady and unguarded. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, meant only for Ethan. The question was simple, but it carried years of unspoken understanding. Ethan nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He wanted to say something, to name the feeling growing between them, but the weight of his past still clung to him like damp clothes after a storm. Back at Caleb's apartment, they sat on the couch, a safe distance between them. Ethan stared at the floor, his mind replaying the night with Marie, the way her touch had tainted his sense of self. "I don't know how to be normal," he said finally, the words spilling out. "Not after her. Not after keeping it in so long." Caleb leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Normal's overrated," he said with a small smile. "You're not broken, Ethan. You're just healing." The sincerity in his voice cracked something open in Ethan, a vulnerability he'd spent years hiding. He looked at Caleb, really looked at him the way his blonde hair caught the lamplight, the way his eyes held no judgment, only care. "I think I like you," Ethan blurted, his face flushing. The words felt reckless, like stepping onto thin ice. Caleb's smile widened, soft and genuine. "I've been waiting for you to catch up," he said, his tone teasing but warm. He reached for Ethan's hand, and this time, Ethan let their fingers intertwine, the touch grounding him in a way he hadn't expected. At home, Lisa was grappling with her own turmoil. She'd found an old photo of her and Marie, taken at a summer barbecue when Ethan was 12. They'd been laughing, carefree, and now the memory felt like a lie. She tossed the photo into a drawer, unable to look at it, but not ready to throw it away. She wanted to fix things for Ethan, to make up for the years she'd missed the signs. But she didn't know where to start. She began researching support groups, therapists, anything to help Ethan heal. One evening, she sat him down, her hands fidgeting. "I found someone you can talk to," she said. "A counselor, if you want." Ethan tensed, the idea of opening up to a stranger daunting. But Lisa's eyes were so earnest, so full of love, that he nodded. "I'll think about it," he said, and for the first time, he meant it. As weeks passed, Ethan and Caleb grew closer, their connection a fragile but growing thread. They spent evenings exploring Portland's quirky corners, used bookstores, food carts, quiet parks where they could talk without the world intruding. Caleb shared his own stories. The rejection he'd faced from his conservative family. The freedom he'd found in being himself. "You'll get there," he told Ethan one night, as they sat on a park bench, the city skyline glittering in the distance. "It's not a race. It's just you." Ethan started seeing a counselor, a kind woman named Dr. Ellis who listened without pushing. Talking about Marie was like pulling thorns from his skin, painful but necessary. He began to untangle the shame he'd carried, to see that her actions weren't his fault. Dr. Ellis helped him name the violation for what it was, and with each session, Ethan felt a little lighter. But Marie wasn't gone completely. One day, Ethan saw her at a coffee shop, her laugh carrying across the room. His stomach dropped, and he froze, memories flooding back. Caleb, who was with him, noticed immediately. "You don't have to talk to her," he said, his voice firm. "You owe her nothing." Ethan nodded, but his eyes lingered on Marie, who hadn't seen him. She looked the same, confident, untouchable, and it infuriated him that she'd never apologized, never even asked why he'd pulled away. That night, Ethan wrote in his journal something Dr. Ellis had suggested. He poured out his anger, his hurt, and for the first time, a flicker of defiance. He wasn't the scared kid anymore. He was finding his voice, and he wouldn't let Marie's shadow silence him again. Ethan's journal became his sanctuary, a place where he could scream without sound. He wrote about the coffee shop encounter, the way Marie's laugh had clawed at his peace. "She doesn't get to keep this power over me," he scrawled, the pen digging into the paper. The words felt like a vow, a step toward reclaiming himself. Caleb noticed the change. They were at a record store, flipping through vinyls, when Ethan really laughed for the first time in weeks. It was a small moment, but it lit up Caleb's face. "There you are," he said, nudging Ethan's shoulder. Ethan blushed, caught off guard by how much Caleb's approval meant. Their relationship was still undefined, a dance of glances and tentative touches, but it was real, and that was enough for now. Lisa, too, saw Ethan's shift. She'd started attending a support group for parents, learning how to navigate her guilt and anger. One evening, she cooked Ethan's favorite lasagna and invited Caleb over, a quiet gesture of acceptance. As they ate, Lisa shared stories of Ethan as a kid, his obsession with comic books, his knack for fixing things around the house. Caleb listened, his eyes flicking to Ethan with a warmth that made Ethan's heart stutter. Lisa noticed, and her smile held a knowing edge. But the past wasn't done with them. A letter arrived from Marie, addressed to Lisa. Ethan found it on the kitchen counter, his name in her familiar handwriting sending a chill down his spine. Lisa opened it, her face hardening as she read. "She wants to meet," she said, her voice tight. "Says she misses me. Wants to explain." Ethan's stomach churned. "What do you want to do?" he asked, his voice small. Lisa tore the letter in half, her hand shaking. "I want her out of our lives," she said. "But I need to hear her say what she did. For you." Ethan nodded, torn between gratitude and dread. He didn't want to see Marie, but he knew Lisa needed closure as much as he did. They agreed to meet at a neutral spot, a park near the river. Caleb insisted on coming, his presence a steadying force. When they arrived, Marie was already there, sitting on a bench, her posture stiff. She looked older, her confidence frayed. Lisa didn't waste time. "Tell me the truth," she said, her voice like steel. "What did you do to my son?" Marie's eyes darted to Ethan, then away. "It wasn't like that," she started, her voice defensive. He was upset, confused. I was just being friendly. Ethan's blood boiled. The word friendly a slap. Before he could stop himself, he stepped forward. You made me feel like nothing, he said, his voice trembling but clear. You knew what you were doing. The park went quiet, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Marie's face crumpled, but she didn't apologize. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said finally, her voice hollow. It wasn't enough, and Ethan knew it never would be. But standing there, speaking his truth, he felt a shift, a spark of power he hadn't known he had. Lisa took his hand, her grip fierce. We're done here, she said to Marie, and they walked away, Caleb close behind. Ethan's heart pounded, but for the first time, it wasn't just fear. It was pride, raw and new. That night, Ethan and Caleb sat on the roof of Caleb's building, the city sprawling below them. You were incredible today, Caleb said, his voice soft. Ethan looked at him, the moonlight catching the edges of his face. I couldn't have done it without you, Ethan admitted. Caleb smiled, leaning closer, and this time, Ethan didn't hesitate. Their lips met, tentative at first, then sure, a kiss that felt like a beginning. As they pulled apart, Ethan felt the weight of years lift. Just a little. He wasn't healed. Not completely. But he was moving forward. And with Caleb by his side, he believed he could keep going. The kiss lingered in Ethan's mind. A quiet revolution against the shadows of his past. He and Caleb were navigating something new. Something fragile but real. And it gave Ethan a reason to wake up each morning with a little less dread. They spent their days exploring Portland's edges, hidden cafes, thrift stores, the quiet paths along the river where they could be themselves without the world's eyes on them. But healing wasn't linear. Some nights, Ethan woke sweating, Marie's voice echoing in his dreams. He'd sit up, heart racing, and text Caleb, who always answered, no matter the hour. You're not alone, Caleb would write. And those words became Ethan's anchor. Dr. Ellis helped him name the nightmares as trauma, not weakness. And slowly, Ethan began to believe her. Lisa was changing, too. She'd thrown herself into rebuilding their bond, asking Ethan about his day, his dreams, his fears. One evening, she pulled out an old sketchbook of his, filled with drawings from when he was younger superheroes. Cityscapes, a world where he felt in control. You're so talented, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I want you to have everything you deserve. Ethan hugged her, the first real hug in years, and felt a piece of their fractured connection mend. At college, Ethan was finding his footing. He'd enrolled in a community college, studying graphic design, a passion he'd buried under years of self-doubt. Caleb, a music major, dragged him to campus events, concerts, art shows, late-night study sessions that turned into debates about life and love. Their relationship deepened, no longer just a spark but a steady flame. Caleb was patient, never pushing Ethan beyond what he was ready for. And Ethan was learning to trust again, to believe he was worthy of love. But Marie's shadow lingered. Ethan heard through a mutual friend that she'd moved to Seattle, claiming she needed a fresh start. The news stung not because she was gone, but because she'd never reached out, never acknowledged the pain she'd caused. Ethan wrote about it in his journal, his words sharp with anger but also resolve. She doesn't get to define me, he wrote. Not anymore. One day, Ethan and Caleb attended a local LGBTQ+ support group, a step Ethan had been nervous to take. The room was filled with people of all ages, their stories different but their strength shared. Ethan listened, his heart pounding, and when it was his turn, he spoke. I kept a secret for years, he said, his voice steady. It hurt me, but I'm here now. And I'm not hiding anymore. The room applauded, and Caleb squeezed his hand, pride shining in his eyes. Lisa, inspired by Ethan's courage, started volunteering at a youth shelter, helping kids who'd faced rejection or worse. She told Ethan about it over breakfast one morning, her face lit with purpose. I want to make sure no one feels alone like you did, she said. Ethan's chest swelled with gratitude. His mom wasn't perfect, but she was trying, and that meant everything. As spring bloomed, Ethan and Caleb planned a road trip, a chance to escape the city and just be. They drove to the Oregon coast, the ocean stretching endless before them. Standing on the shore, the wind whipping through their hair, Ethan felt free, not fully healed, but closer than he'd ever been. Caleb took his hand, and they stood in silence, the waves crashing around them. I love you, Caleb said, his voice almost lost in the wind. Ethan's heart stopped, then soared. I love you too, he said, the words new but true. They kissed again, the ocean their witness. And Ethan knew this was his turning point, a moment where the past didn't win. The Oregon coast stretched wild and vast, its waves a steady rhythm against Ethan's newfound courage. Caleb's I love you echoed in his heart, a beacon through the fog of his past. As they drove back to Portland, their hands intertwined, Ethan felt a clarity he hadn't known was possibly a belief that he could build a life beyond his pain. Back in the city, Ethan threw himself into his art. His graphic design classes were a revelation, each project a chance to tell a story through color and form. He started a series inspired by his journey, bold lines and muted tones that spoke of struggle and hope. His professor, a gruff but kind woman, pulled him aside one day. Your work has soul, she said. Don't stop. Ethan carried her words like a talisman, proof he was more than his scars. Caleb's music was flourishing, too. He'd written a song for Ethan, a quiet ballad about resilience and love, and played it for him one night at a small gig. The crowd was small, but Ethan felt like the only person in the room. His eyes locked on Caleb as the lyrics wove their story. You're my home, Caleb sang, and Ethan's throat tightened, overwhelmed by the gift of being seen. Lisa was finding her own path. Her work at the youth shelter had become a calling, and she'd started advocating for better resources for queer kids. She and Ethan talked more openly now, about his relationship with Caleb, about his dreams. One night, she showed him a letter she'd written to Marie but never sent. It was raw, full of anger and grief, but it ended with a declaration, my son is stronger than you'll ever know. Ethan hugged her, tears in both their eyes, and felt the weight of their shared healing. But closure with Marie remained elusive. Ethan learned she'd been telling mutual friends that she'd done nothing wrong, that Ethan had overreacted. The news hit hard, stirring old doubts. He talked it over with Dr. Ellis, who reminded him that Marie's denial didn't change his truth. You spoke up, she said. That's your power. Ethan nodded, but the lack of accountability gnawed at him. He decided to write Marie a letter not for her, but for himself. He sat at his desk, the city quiet outside his window, and let the words flow. You hurt me, he wrote. You made me feel small, but I'm not small anymore. I'm living my life, and you don't get to be part of it. He didn't send it, didn't need to. Folding it into his journal felt like closing a door. As summer approached, Ethan and Caleb moved in together, a small apartment with creaky floors and a view of the city. It was a leap, but it felt right. They painted the walls, hung fairy lights, made it theirs. One night, as they cooked dinner, Caleb pulled Ethan into a dance, their laughter filling the space. Ethan realized he was happy, not the fleeting kind, but the kind that settled into your bones. Lisa visited often, her pride in Ethan evident in every smile. She'd started dating again, a kind man from her support group who treated her with respect. Ethan liked him, liked seeing his mom light up. Their family wasn't what it had been, but it was stronger, rebuilt on trust and love. At a Pride event that June, Ethan and Caleb walked hand in hand, the streets alive with color and music. Ethan wore a rainbow pin, a small but bold declaration. When a performer spoke about surviving trauma, Ethan felt a kinship, a reminder that he wasn't alone. He squeezed Caleb's hand, grateful for the life they were building, step by step. Summer in Portland bloomed with possibility, and Ethan was learning to embrace it. His art was gaining notice. His professor had submitted one of his pieces to a local gallery, and it sold, a small victory that felt monumental. Caleb framed the check, hanging it on their apartment wall with a grin. First of many, he said, and Ethan believed him. Their life together was a tapestry of small moments, late-night talks, shared playlists, quiet mornings tangled in bed. Caleb's music career was taking off, too. He'd booked a gig at a bigger venue, and Ethan was his biggest fan, cheering from the front row. Their love wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and that was more than Ethan had ever dared hope for. Lisa's transformation was just as profound. Her work at the youth shelter had led to a promotion, and she was now leading workshops for parents of queer kids. She and Ethan had rebuilt their trust, their conversations deeper than ever. One evening, she gave him a photo album she'd made, filled with pictures of the old ones from his childhood, new ones with Caleb. "This is us," she said, her voice thick. "Our family." Ethan hugged her, the album a testament to their resilience. Marie's absence was a wound that had scabbed over, not fully healed, but no longer bleeding. Ethan had heard she was still in Seattle, living her life as if nothing had happened. He didn't need her apology anymore. He'd found his own closure. His journal was full now, pages of anger giving way to hope, to dreams of a future where he defined himself. One crisp fall day, Ethan and Caleb hiked to Multnomah Falls, the water cascading like a promise of renewal. They stood at the base, mist on their faces, and Ethan felt a peace he hadn't known was possible. "I'm proud of you," Caleb said, his arm around Ethan's shoulders. "You've come so far." Ethan leaned into him, the words sinking deep. He was proud of himself, too. At college, Ethan started mentoring younger students, sharing his art and his story. He spoke at a campus event about surviving trauma, his voice steady as he told a room full of strangers what he'd overcome. The applause was overwhelming, but it was Caleb's tearful smile in the audience that meant the most. Lisa threw a small party for Ethan's 20th birthday, just family and close friends. The apartment was filled with laughter, music, and the smell of cake. As Ethan blew out the candles, he made a wish not for the past to change, but for the strength to keep moving forward. Caleb squeezed his hand under the table, and Lisa raised a glass, her eyes shining. "To my son," she said, "the bravest person I know." Later, as the party wound down, Ethan stepped onto the balcony, the city lights stretching before him. Caleb joined him, their shoulders brushing. "What's next?" Caleb asked, his voice soft. Ethan smiled, his heart full. "Everything," he said. And for the first time, he believed it. His silence had been his cage, but speaking his truth had set him free. Marie's actions had shaped his past, but they didn't own his future. With Caleb's love, Lisa's support, and his own resilience, Ethan was building a life where he could be himself, unafraid, unashamed, and whole. The hurt was still there, a scar that might never fade, but it no longer defined him. He was more than his pain, and that was the most meaningful victory of all.